Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Thank you for coming to my channel. I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button before you left. Um, I wanted to give a special shout out to my patrons over at Patreon. I have a pretty good growing group over there who are getting exclusive content that I'm putting just on Patreon. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, or just supporting an independent artist, you should check out my Patreon. Uh, there's another way to support me as well. If you're so inclined, you can buy me a coffee. And both those links are in the video description down below. So check those out. I have a really nice group of people over in Patreon, and it's been fun interacting with them and sharing ideas. So really like that kind of community we're building there. Today's project is actually one of the projects I suggested to them over on Patreon, and I'm going to make a YouTube video out of this one, but I gave them a prompt to use a piece of furniture, specifically a lamp or a light, as inspiration for a project, and that's what I'm going to do today. I picked out a funky light, probably mid-century modern or 60s or something like that. It's kind of it's very retro looking, and I'm going to go ahead and make a pendant based off of its shapes. So it's fun to find inspiration in everyday objects sometimes, so that's what this one's going to be. It's going to include some hollow forms, which I haven't shown on any of my videos before as far as I know, so some information about that. So stay tuned, enjoy the video, and hope you get something good out of it. Okay, so this is a drawing based off of the lamp that we saw somewhere online. It doesn't, of course, it doesn't have stones on it. I'm not even sure what it's made out of, but it's got these stack of four, looks like hollow oval cylinders set on their sides, and it just has a really funky kind of 60s look to it, and I liked it, and so I thought, well, we could make a pendant out of that. I think what I'll do is I'm going to make these as little hollow forms, and we'll talk about some things you have to worry about when you're doing sealed, soldering sealed stuff. And then I'm going to mount a bezel on each of them and put one of these stones in each one. These ones are little emeralds, and these two are dyed agates, I believe. So I just thought they'd go together pretty well, and they look like they would complement this piece pretty well. Up here I'm going to do two circles, I think, with some square wire between them in order to create a cavity for the chain to run through, and that'll be our bail. And this will probably be 14 gauge square wire right here, 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 and here is usually what I would do there. So I think for the boxes themselves, I'm going to use the outside, I'm just going to use 26 gauge sterling sheet. For the tops and bottoms, I'll probably use 22. And then I think that's pretty much all we'll need. 26 or 28 gauge 3/16 inch bezel strip made out of fine silver is what I usually use for bezels. And I think that's all. So let's, I guess we could start by, let's start by making the box shapes, and then we'll do the stones in a while. Change things up. I usually do bezels first, but let's do it differently this time, just for giggles. Set these in here because knowing me, I'll knock them off the table and then I'll have to crawl around on the ground for about a half an hour looking for them. So, alright, so let's see, I need some 26 gauge. I can probably cut strips off of right here and get pretty straight ones. I'll scribe a straight line and cut off the edge here, and then we'll start from there, and that way we can get some nice strips. I'm not sure how wide to make these, not super thick. I'm guessing, well, we'll measure it out in a minute. Clearly not straight. Sometimes cutting a straight line is pretty hard. Everybody asked me about these shears. These are just little Fiskars craft shears. They cut thin silver really well. Thick silver pretty well. So now let's do, I don't want them to be super big, so why don't we go like 1/8 of an inch? I wonder, I was just thinking, would it be cool to do different depths on these boxes? Like for the bigger ones, a little bit taller, and the smaller ones a little bit thinner, or vice versa? I don't know. I might, just for this one, I might keep them the same. That might be some variation that might be sort of fun, though. Hopefully I kept that reasonably straight. Well, I can see it's not perfect, but I guess it doesn't have to be perfect for these ones. And I can file it a little bit to try and make it a little neater. Alright, I'm just going to kind of manually shape this. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but once I get a length, then I can use it to measure the one that goes right there. That's pretty close. So let's make a mark outside here. Sometimes I do that and then I open it back up and I realize I can't really see the scratch. So I always try to make sure to get it pretty close. Ooh, yeah, it looks like we got enough to do the second one off of this first strip. Now, get these ends filed nice and flat. Alright. Let's make sure this is still pretty straight. Those of you who've sent me pictures of projects that you've made based on some of my videos to Instagram, I really appreciate that. It's kind of fun to see those. So if you ever do something like that, or if you just want to show me some of your work, send it to me on Instagram. I like seeing other people's stuff. So everything that's been sent so far has been very well done from what I thought. Very nice. A couple of them I thought looked better than mine, so which is good. Okay, let's see if we can figure out the size of the bigger ones. I think I'm going to have to cut another one. I don't think there's enough here for both of these big ones. Wow. Actually, that's pretty close. That's weird. I'll just go with that. Close enough. I'm neaten up the tops a little bit. Push stuff like this past itself so that when you get ready to solder it, that the two ends are pushing together tightly. Use that work hardening of the metal to keep them together, because under the heat sometimes the metal will relax and they'll pull apart just a little bit, and that way it makes it super difficult to get a solder because solder doesn't jump gaps very well. It's always kind of fun when you're doing something you haven't tried before. Never done one quite like this. haven't done too many hollow form things in general. I don't seem to generally get pulled in that direction. So you can solder this just about any way that you want, I think. I'm probably just going to fold these and drape them over. So I can just set them on top of the sheet here. Solder joints are going to be. First, before you solder, you have to flux things. That cleans the metal and gets rid of any silver oxide or other oxides that have formed on there. And it gets crusty like this, which keeps it from reoxidizing under the heat. And the reason we care about that is because solder doesn't have to stick to silver oxide, but it loves to stick to silver. There we go. Well, here you go. Here's another way you can do it. Set it on top of the piece of solder, where the solder joint is going to be. Once that flows, as long as it's in contact, it should just suck right up in there. Just like that. So the sound effect always helps too. It's kind of like we're making bezels, except we're using sterling instead of fine silver. And we're not going to put any stones in these. We now need to get them into that oval shape. Probably put it on a mandrel. My thought was make it round first and then slightly squish it into an oval. And where the solder joint is, I'm going to put that on the long side of the oval because it's always going to be a little bit stiffer there. And these ones are just a little bit too shy of that. The bigger ones I'll be able to do on the mandrel to round them out. These ones I'm just going to have to manually do it, I think. It's right between the sizes of my jump ring mandrel and my regular mandrel. A little more elongated. That's pretty good. We'll work on the next one here. Pretty good. So if you make them big enough to fit on here, it might be easier just to, you know, tap them just a little bit. So now we can just kind of, here's the solder joint, so let's make sure he's on the long side of the oval. Same thing here. Now I can just kind of fine tune it probably. Pretty close. It doesn't look too bad. When I first started this, I really struggled with shaping things like this. I always had trouble figuring out where to put the pliers, how much pressure to put, which direction should I tilt them. It doesn't take very long for you to figure out those little ways to move your hands. You kind of develop a muscle memory after a while, or a little script in your brain that you just kind of automatically go to the right spot to put pressure where it needs to go, and then it's no longer very hard. So know that if you're at that stage, it gets easier. I think I'm going to use 22 for these. Okay, so got top and bottom for those two, got a top and bottom for these two. So probably should talk about soldering hollow forms, because if I was to solder this down here and then solder this on top, it probably would go fine. But if I go then to solder it onto something else, it's going to reheat the gases that are stuck inside of the hollow area, and they're going to expand and contract and do some weird stuff. I've heard of stories of hollow forms exploding when people went to solder them to something else and getting gold shrapnel in their face and such. So those are anecdotal stories I've heard. I don't know if they're true, but better safe than sorry. I'm going to drill a hole in one side of each of these before I solder it on, so there is a way for gases to come in and out. And that should take care of our problem. Some holes. Flattening those back a little bit since I used a center punch just to make sure the drill bit wouldn't skip around too much. I thought it'd be nice if these were all similarly aligned in the back, and I can alternate them in the back. Show some symmetry at least. Not probably necessary technically, but it'll make it look nice from the back as well. So I'm just going to solder these down just like as if I was doing a standard bezel. The only real difference is I'm using, for the sides, I'm using sterling silver instead. When you're fluxing something like this, when it gets all bubbly like that, you want to keep heating it until it kind of flattens back out, and then your solder won't. It'll be easier to get your solder where you want it to be then. So to start with, I'm going to throw a few in each of these. For the bigger ones, maybe 5. It's a little bit thicker sheet than I normally use for the bottom when I'm doing something like this, so really I'm going to focus a lot of the torch's heat on the bottom because the piece on top here is exposed and easier to get up to temperature. The part on the bottom isn't. A lot of people use tripods in order to access the bottom of things when they're soldering, which is not a bad idea. Some people like this. So I'm going to try and get all these tops to be nice and flat. And then in order to get the solder where I want it to be on these guys, I'm going to sweat it on to the surface so it's already in place. And then we're just going to flip these on top of those other things and solder them in. But I think it'll be easier if I trim off the previous sheet first. But let's get some solder attached to these. Sweat soldering is when you're just pre-melting some solder into a place where you want it to be prior to repositioning things so that that solder will reflow when you heat it up enough again. So I just want to heat this until they puddle and spread out a little bit. Probably have noticed that it's not creating a complete oval, the shape that we're going to make, but that's okay because once that solder starts reflowing again, it'll wick along the seam, which is going to be where it's in contact all the way along, so that should take care of itself. Okay, so now I'm just going to trim these guys off. There, that one pretty close to the edge. I'm just going to spend some time filing those down nice. I just had a thought. I could mount the bezels right over the holes because that would conceal the holes, and it doesn't matter because by the time we're setting the stones, we won't ever be reheating it again, so maybe we can do that and not have any holes anywhere showing up. That would be kind of cool. I think I might try that and see if that works. Let's see if the bezels are the right size. We need to make a circular thing for the bail. I guess we can cut them out right now. So I need to be about, I'm going to use my disc cutter. They make really nice ones of these, but this is just kind of a cheapy one. I think I probably got it on Amazon or something. But I want something that makes a circle about that big. That's about right. So the way this works is find the hole that this one fits in. It's right there. And I think I'm going to use some of this 22 gauge like I was using for the top and bottom of these things. And then I just got to position it in that spot there and hit it with a hammer. I got to do this on the concrete floor, so I'm going to do that out of the camera. But basically you just hit it really hard with a hammer. You want to try and get it to knock out punch out a perfect circle. But you want to hit it hard enough to get it in one blow if you can. Otherwise it bounces a little bit and sometimes it'll leave a mark that you can see. So, okay, so you can see it just knocks out perfect little circles, and that's what I wanted. Sometime I'll do a video about how to use these, but there's not really much to it. You just push it in there, like I said, and hit it with a hammer, and it knocks it down through there. Then you got to punch this out with something, which I used a center punch just to push it out because it kind of gets hung up on the sheet. So I think for my bail, I'm going to do something I've not tried before. I'm going to have a circle on the top, circle on the bottom, and then something between it, but a slot for the chain to go through. I wanted to create a nice pathway to go through there for the chain. So I was going to curve it on the bottom and then have a curved one on the top too, but I kind of wanted to, to fill that in too. I was just thinking that's not very tall. That's not going to allow for a very thick chain to go through there. Maybe we need to make it a little higher than that. A little scrap 18 gauge I got laying around here. Let's do that. I think that'll work better. Nothing like changing plans in the middle of the project, right? This little chunk here might serve our purpose just fine. Maybe a little tricky to solder this thread on the edge, but we'll try it. To be just opposite. I think that's probably good enough. Doesn't have to be beautiful on the inside. Alright, on this one, the easiest way would just be to set some solder on here and then flip this thing over on top. In theory, we should just have to heat this whole thing until that solder flows on the bottom piece again. Sticks this together. Which it looks like it did. Let's see. So you can see my alignment isn't perfect, but a little filing probably. Okay, I've tried to remove any excess sticking out where I didn't have it quite soldered to the edge of the circle, and I made the circle a little smaller. I probably will need to do a little bit of more cleanup to make sure it's still circular, because it's hand filing here. I think that'll be pretty cool. Alright, so let's put the other sides on these things. So, just to make sure I had it nice and flat, I was going to file the tops of all of these just a little bit. I'm going to flux the tops of these a little bit. I'm going to lift these up just a little bit to get underneath them. Okay, so these I just got to do exactly the same thing I did to the top, is trim them off and then file them flush. So that's what I'm going to do. Probably won't make you watch the entire process, since you get the idea already, probably. Okay, you get the general idea. Got kind of a little silver hollow pill now. We'll make some bezels now. We'll start with the little emeralds. These are marginally emeralds. You could not see through them if you tried. However, they're pretty green. If you're new to this, basically I'm just shaping this fine silver bezel strip around the stone in order to get a length. I need to cut it to make the bezel for these stones. I'm going to cut these a little shorter. These are 3/16 inch bezel. I don't have any smaller stuff right now, so I'm just going to cut it a little bit shorter to save me some filing. I think most of the skills in this particular video are beginner skills, although just the sheer number of steps in this particular one is going to be a little intimidating to someone who's a beginner. So work your way up to this one if you're starting. I would call this probably intermediate. I used to in my classes when I first started teaching silversmithing. I used to sometimes let people who were beginners try more advanced projects, and that was almost always a bad idea because they ended up frustrated because they didn't quite understand how to control the heat and everything yet, because that takes a little practice. And I ended up having to fix, you know, the stuff that they made because they just didn't have the practice yet. So it ended up being frustrating for everybody concerned. These are the round ones, these are the oval ones. When you're shaping bezels like I do, I use just about that much of the needle nose pliers. That doesn't look too bad. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do like that. So I'm going to solder the bezels on. Then I'm going to cut some pieces of square wire and get these all soldered together, and then we'll add this on here, the top, and then we'll let it pickle for a while, and then I'll polish it up. So that's pretty close. Let's solder those ones on. Let's get these guys soldered on. Hopefully those are pretty lined the way they're supposed to be. I guess we'll find out. I think 12 is going to be a little better. Just a little bit thicker. Don't need too much of it. But let's get it straight first. So I don't need a very big piece, because I'm going to solder one to the bottom of each of these, and then I'll solder them all together. I don't want these to be super long, so let's cut them about That looks pretty good to me. My frame here. Starting to look like what I was envisioning. Alright, so I'm going to let him pickle for quite a while actually, because he's pretty messed up. And rest my back for a while, and then I will I'm going to file the bezels down to the correct height and do some pre-polishing, and then we'll set the stones and we'll be done. So I got them mostly polished, and I think I'm going to go ahead and set these stones. That looks like a pretty good height. Let's set him real quick. Straight in first. I'm still going to go back and do just a little final touch-up polish after I'm done with this. These ones are kind of flat-topped, so I have to go straight in and then kind of just curl it over the very edge of the lip. Before I started this, and after I did the polishing and stuff, I hit this with a blow dryer for a while, just to make sure that I got rid of any liquid that was left inside of the hollow space in here. I have a sloshy pendant. That's the basic idea. I need to do a little bit of final polishing on it, but that's how it's going to end up looking. These surfaces got a little scratched up when I was scrubbing it down, so I'll hit it with the white or the Zam a little bit more, and then lightly wash it off. So, yeah. All right. I'll take some better pictures and show you at the end. Okay, that was the lamp-inspired pendant. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit the like button on the way out. I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. There's lots of content like that here. I have over 120 videos now, and I'm putting out 3 per week, so it's a good place to stop back and check. And if you ring the bell, you'll get updates when a new video drops. So make sure to do that if you want to see more stuff like this. Thanks again to my patrons and those people who are buying me a coffee. I appreciate you, and I also appreciate all the YouTubers on here who put nice comments in my comment section. So if you got suggestions or comments or criticisms or whatever, feel free to put them in the comment section. I try to read all those and answer them if I can. So Thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.